Let me ask how many people in the audience are students here at Penn or neighboring universities. Well, let me tell you something. I want to tell you something that doesn't often get spoken to. See all these guys behind me? They're a lot more than cops. No, for real. For real. When I was your age, the vast majority of law enforcement officers, good women and men, mostly men, almost all men in those days, were worked hard and took a lot of risks. Faced fewer complex problems than we face today. But most of them out of my neighborhood from Claymont, Delaware, the neighborhood I was raised in Claymont, and where you either became a police officer, a firefighter, a tradesman in one of the unions, or a priest. I didn't qualify for any, so I became a lawyer, you know. But all kidding aside, all of these guys here, all these guys and women here, they're all extremely well educated. They all get it. I had the honor, and I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you. I had the honor when the president asked me what responsibility did I want when he asked me to be vice president. I said two things. I said I want to be the last guy in the room in every major decision. You make it, but I get to be the last guy to give you my advice. And he's kept that promise. And secondly, I want to maintain control of the Violence Against Women Act and the law and the cops office. So he's allowed me to pick everybody, me to go and recommend, go out and pick who I wanted to head those offices. And obviously he decides, but I had no problem with the recommendations I made. I picked Gil. The president knew of Gil, and it was a slam dunk, as they say. But I want to tell you something about him. You heard him talk today. This is a cop who was on the beat and on the street in Buffalo, New York, and Seattle, Washington. And he appreciates more than any, even my daughter's a graduate of Penn's School of Social Work here, as a social worker. He knows as much about the social work side of this as he does the law enforcement side. This is a guy who's absolutely thoroughly committed and understands, like all these folks do. We just had this large round table. You know what they wanted to talk to me about? They wanted to talk to me about the question of drugs and guns and drugs and rehabilitation. They know they can't put enough cops in the street that would make things safe, and it's better to have somebody in rehab instead of committing 173 crimes a year. How many cops would it take to stop that? So folks, look, these guys are the guys and women that I'm proudest to be with, along with our military, of any group of people in all the years I've been in office, because they're really smart. They're not just tough, they're smart. And look, I came today, and I've been going around the country talking about the Jobs Act. I want to say to the press, some of our critics, the president of mine, say, well, this is politics. Well, in one sense, it's politics writ large. It's going to the people, because when we sat down with our opposite numbers, most of the mainstream folks in that other outfit, they know we got to do something. But this is not your father's Republican Party. This is a different deal. If we were able to deal with just the leadership, we would have had a deal on everything from the budget to this a long time ago. But in fairness to the Republican leadership, they have trouble selling this to this new group of congressmen and senators they have. They're not bad guys. They just have a very different value set than we do. So what the president and I decided, and I'm going to say something outrageous, if there's anything I'm an expert on, it's the United States Senate and Congress. Only 13 members in all of history ever served there longer than me, and you can tell by my age. And folks, we're out here not playing politics. We're out here trying to go over the heads of those people who don't want to compromise on anything, so that we get pressure. So I want to make no bones about it. And every great president has done that when there's something as vital as this. Now look, I'm not going to take time to go through the whole Jobs Act, but it's pretty simple, folks. It, in fact, calls for spending a lot of money, but it's paid for. It's paid for by saying that people who make over $1 million, average income of people who make over $1 million is $3.2 million a year, that they pay a 5% surtax in order to fund this. That's all it takes. 78% of the American people think that's fair. Most millionaires think it's fair. And so here's what happened. The mayor was right that we didn't get to vote on it. The truth is, what he didn't say to you is, the opposition wouldn't even allow us to debate it. Here's what happened last week. The jobs bill was brought up, and the other side used a tool available in the Senate, a filibuster, to say, in order even to put this legislation on the floor to debate, you have to get 60 votes. 51 senators voted for it. 49 said, we're not even going to let you debate it. So we're not being political. The president and I have said, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the American people and take a piece of this jobs bill at a time. Because literally, when the president and I sat down, we literally together sat down and said, we need a jobs bill. What should we got to kickstart this economy in light of the brinksmanship that was played, and we got downgraded, and what's going on in Europe, et cetera. I won't bore you with all the detail. You Penn students know inside out and backwards. But here's the deal, guys. We literally, when we sat down, said, let's put in this bill things that will actually work and that we know Republicans support. We weren't looking for a fight. We're looking for an answer. So what did we put in there? We said we're going to cut the tax of small businesses in half, the payroll tax. When have you found a Republican congressman against cutting taxes for small business? We said what we're going to do is we're going to provide up to a $9,000 incentive if you take a kid like my son who doesn't need a job. He's the chief law enforcement officer in Delaware. He's the attorney general. But after a year in Iraq, a lot of his buddies came back. No jobs. Put their lives on the line, no jobs. Unemployment rate for veterans, 11.5%. So he said, you go hire a veteran, you get a $9,000 tax break to do it. So folks, is there anything ideological in that? Is there anything ideological in saying we have to rebuild the roads and highways and bridges in this state? An incredible number of your bridges are literally obsolete and dangerous. And that goes all across the country. The Society of Engineers says we have over $1.7 trillion, I think it is, over $1 trillion in backlog in terms of America's infrastructure. Since when is the other team against that? And folks, since when are we saying that in this economic recession, that when you lay off 400,000 educators, 400,000, you lay off over 10,000, just in the last 13 months, 10,000 police officers, and more to come in every jurisdiction. And you lay off 7,000 firefighters. Who is against putting them back to work for terms of just public safety, security, and our children? The list goes on in the jobs bill. There's nothing in the jobs bill that former Republican presidents haven't supported and Republicans in the Congress. So why won't they even let us have a vote on it? Well, I'll tell you why. Well, I won't tell you why. Because it'll make the headlines in the press and it will take away from what I want to say. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Starting this week, we're taking every constituent part of this bill and we're bringing it up for a separate vote. I want my friends to explain why these guys shouldn't put their folks back to work, why Camden doesn't deserve to have its police force restored. This bill would provide for 15,000 to 18,000 police officers. You say, well, Joe, it must be inaccurate. You say 15 to 8, that's a big deal. Because we allow flexibility. We say if you don't want a police officer, you can take the money and you can have somebody who runs your crime lab because you don't have somebody doing that. You can have the flexibility to use it for law enforcement. But it's likely to be 15,000 to 18,000 new shields out there, or old shields coming back to work. 7,000 firefighters coming back to work. And over 280,000 teachers. And so you know how we pay for it. And by the way, that whole thing cost, this portion of it cost about $30 billion. Because that's a lot of money. Here's how we pay for it. My dad used to say, when I say, but Dad, I thought, he'd say, Champ, if everything's equally important to you, nothing's important to you. Literally, life's about choices and priorities. So here's the choice they're going to have this week. Raise the tax 0.5% on people with average incomes of $3.1 million. Not one single increase in tax for anybody that makes less than $1 million pays for all of this. And you know what that means? If you're making $1 million, and I pray God some of you are, but if you're making $1 million, that means literally, not figuratively, you will pay $500 more in taxes. You hear me? So folks, we're convinced, and that's why I'm glad the press is here. If the press knows the choice is restoring the police forces, fire services, and teachers in America versus charging 0.5% increase in people making over $1 million in taxes, I think the choice is clear. And by the way, according to some of the polling data, millionaires support this. You don't have to be poor to be patriotic. Not a joke. There's as many, and I'm not being a wise guy, there's as many patriotic millionaires and wealthy people as there are poor people. But folks, that's the choice. That's the choice. But the reason I'm here today, specifically at this moment, I was in York, Pennsylvania today talking about teachers. I was in Flint, Michigan. I was in Florida. I've been all over the country talking about various aspects of this bill and the whole bill. The reason I'm here today is because of these good women and men standing behind me. Guys, they have one god-awful job even in good times. Even in good times. And by the way, unless you think I'm exaggerating, I've now traveled over 430,000 miles traveling around the world since vice president. I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan 19 times. I've been up in these fobs. No, here's why I say it. These guys every single morning quietly, and particularly their troops, every single morning get up, they pin that shield on, they put on that sidearm, and their husband or wife and children watch them go out every morning wondering what's going to happen today. Sounds corny. It's just like when my son was in Iraq for a year, a Penn graduate, I might add. My wife, every morning I'd come in, she'd be standing by the sink there, muttering a prayer. When you have a child in harm's way, every single moment you think of it. Well, every single moment their families think of it too, by the way. And this is not only about getting more police on the street to make you safer. There's an irreducible minimum they need to keep their troops safe. So here's the deal. We just had a good meeting. Let me tell you what they wanted to talk to me about. They started off talking to me about you. Not a joke, not about them, about you. Telling me the stories about what they're not able to do in their communities now. Why the response times in some of these jurisdictions. And by the way, I'm almost home. The number 2 largest department in the state, Newcastle County Police. This guy takes care of me. My chief, right here, Zerba. He is a guy who we grew up in the same neighborhoods. We played the same ball together. He's the Wilmington police chief. And there is the superintendent of our state police in the state of Delaware. Look, folks, it's not just Philly, it's all these guys. They worry about what the hell happens to you. And they worry when they cut their forces, what are they talking about? It means the response time to get to you is shorter. It means their ability to intervene, to keep bad things from happening, is shorter. Unless you think I'm joking, that's what they worry about. That's what they're concerned about. And so I heard today the same story I've heard all over the country. In Ohio, in Michigan, in Virginia, in Florida, in Nevada, all over the country that I've gone. I hear the same story. That it's getting a lot harder for us, boss. It's getting a lot harder. These officers are caught in the perfect storm. Fewer cops make it easier to commit more crimes. More crimes drive down property values. Unemployment and foreclosures drive down property values and cause people to abandon homes. Lower property values drive down local budgets. Local budgets drive down the number of cops. It is a perfect downward spiral. As I said, nationally, 10,000 law enforcement officers in the last 18 months, 30,000 vacancies unfilled, authorized but unfilled. In Philly, you're down 200 because you got a mayor who's decided that he's going to cut everything before he cuts this. But they're still down. Across the bridge in Camden, they're hit even harder. Now they have 272 police officers. More than 40% of their force is gone. Everyone with less than 14 years experience has been laid off. So you're on the tree, you're on the job. What do we want? We want guys, college-educated guys like you, men and women, graduating from great universities like this. We want you in law enforcement. Not a joke. Not a joke. This is a science, guys. This is not just go out and run down the bad guys. He jumps the chain link fence. And so what's happening? I'll bet you every one of those guys you laid off is a college graduate. And what happens? You have no new blood. It's not only a tragedy for their officers and their families, it's a tragedy for the community. It's hard to eliminate. It's hard to think they had to eliminate. Here's what they did over in Camden. They eliminated their domestic violence task force, their gang unit, and their traffic unit. It's eliminated, gone. Their school patrol units were reduced from 16 to 4. Their SWAT teams, they're down to 14 officers. And predictably, violent crime is up 40%, murder's up 30%. And without the cops grant that Gil was able to get them, they would have been down another 50 officers this year. 50 officers. I could tell similar stories, not quite as dire, from Wilmington to Allentown to Atlantic City to Lancaster, Upper Moreland, Newcastle County, Bend, Salem, all the people standing behind me. And if I had time, I could list literally 1,000 other communities across this country. Look, it's hard enough for these guys to do their job in good times, but it's almost impossible in hard economic times. They're getting gutted. They're getting hollowed out. It's simple. It's not magical. When you don't have the numbers, it means it's easier to commit a crime. When the economy is down and homes are abandoned and people lose faith, there is more crime. And even if we keep a cop on 3 of the 4 corners of an intersection, you know where the crime will be committed, where the cop's not. When I wrote the crime bill and everybody said, Biden, we've tried this before and we've put another 100,000 cops on the street, we never tried it before. And guess what? It worked. Crime plummeted. Violent crime. When we wrote the Violence Against Women Act and got that passed, violent crime against women dropped 50%. I'm going to be back here on campus, by the way, talking to you men as well as the women about this new problem we have with violence against women. Women between the ages of 16 and 24 have an incredibly high rate of abuse and date rape and other things. I'm coming back and asking you guys to stand up. You guys to stand up and speak out. But here's the deal. Criminals do their best work in neighborhoods where cops aren't. It means there's a burglary in progress in most of the cities behind me on the street. It means the drug deal's going down. Police officer won't be able to respond immediately. And when we get there, the single officer is at greater risk. Their lives are placed in greater danger, and our lives are placed in greater danger. That's why we've introduced $4 billion to put 15,000 to 18,000 cops back in the street to prevent layoffs in the future as well. The other thing I've heard from my friends who oppose this whole jobs bill and that this is just temporary. Well, let me tell you, it's not temporary when that 911 call comes in and a woman's being raped if a cop shows up in time to prevent the rape. It's not temporary to that woman. It's not temporary to the guy whose store is being held up and there's a gun pointed at his head. If the cop shows up and he's not killed, that's not temporary to that store owner. Give me a break, temporary. I wish these guys had thought it's temporary. I wish they had some notion what it's like to be on the other side of a gun or a 200-pound man standing over you telling you to submit. Folks, it matters. It matters. Temporary. If temporary means a faster response to those precarious moments right after a child's been kidnapped, It's not temporary to the family who finds that child recovered. Temporary is everything to those people who are the victims of crime. In the end, this is about choices. It's about priorities. And the country needs this done. Yes, as I said, it costs money. It costs $4 billion. If we were just doing the cops bill, it'd be less than 0.1%. It'd be less than a $75. It'd be less than that. It'd probably be $50 tax on people making over $1 million. Give me a break. We can't afford it. How can we not afford to do this? How can we not afford to do this? So folks, look, I'm here to tell you I need your help. This is not a hard choice. This is really not a hard choice. This is simple, basic stuff, folks. And the one thing, for example, that the commissioner is talking about, you know, to this day, we promised after 9/11, when all those firefighter and law enforcement officers got killed, you know the main reason they got killed, or one of the overwhelming reasons? They couldn't communicate with one another. The hand radios he's got right here, he couldn't pick up, and he couldn't talk to the fire department in New York City. The cop couldn't talk to the fire department. The fire department couldn't talk to the National Guard. The mayor couldn't talk to the state police. And we promised in the 9/11 Commission that that would never happen again. You all own the airways. Government doesn't own it. Radio stations, TV, they don't own it. You own it. So what we did in this, the president was absolutely adamant about this when I negotiated this. We say, you law enforcement this time on, and all the first responders and all the military have what they call the D block. And when we auction off the spectrum, it's estimated to bring in $28 billion, below $26 billion. We're taking $10 billion of that out and going to build out all these systems so they have the radio and the capability to talk to one another. Because God knows there will be another Katrina. God, pray God, there will not be another 9/11. But there may be. There will be other crises. And they deserve the ability to protect themselves and to protect us. So folks, I call on the members of Congress to step up this week. Step up and make a choice. Make a choice. Make a choice for the people in your district. Should they have more teachers back in school? Should they have more police on the beat? Should they have firefighters in the firehouse? Or should you save a millionaire from a $500 tax? Ladies and gentlemen, it's that basic and that simple. Conclude, folks, by saying thank you for the time. And again, I really mean it. A lot of you out here that I see are people who've been out there with no pay, no effort, on behalf of your communities, walking the streets, marching with people, trying to deal with crime. And you students are interested in this as well. So I want to thank you all. And let me say, God bless you all, and may God protect our troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. Thank you all so very much.